And happy Saturday to you. I'm Tina Brock here, your host for Into the Absurd, a virtually existential dinner conversation coming to you virtually from Dublin today, which will figure prominently in a conversation with Michael Toner. Today, we're going to talk about the Beckett Actor, and there is just no one that I know who can bring to life more the stories and what it means to bring Samuel Beckett's words to life on stage. So thank you for joining us. If you're here on Zoom, put your questions in the chat for Michael, and if you're coming in on Facebook Live, and to all of our folks and friends who follow Into the Absurd around the world, thank you so much for being here. We are so excited to hear news that we might be able to be back on the stage with you very soon, and we have more news about that to come, but we'll save that for another time. We want to get to our conversation today with Michael Toner, so let's just bring him to the table. Michael Toner, welcome to Into the Absurd.
Okay, and hello there.
Hello there. You know, we have these conversations quite frequently surrounding this book that you gave to me, which I will cherish forever. It's only about, was that a couple of years ago you gave to me? It's already so dog-eared, but it speaks to, I think, the love that we both have. And I love your stories and hearing about what it was like to work on your revival of Jack MacGowran's show. So I want to start, Michael, by, first of all, thank you for being here, and to ask you, when did you know you wanted to revive the show? Before you saw Jack MacGowran's performance or after?
Oh, it was after. It was after, much after. I was very impressed with the man's with Beckett's writings, and had been for a good while. I was in grad school in Dublin, and it was seeing Jackie MacGowran do beginning to end on stage that it just fascinated me. It was an extraordinary experience, approaching almost a spirituality. I always remember the ending of it when he finished, and instead of immediate applause, the audience may not have known exactly when the exact end was, but there was a dead silence of a couple minutes, and then immediate, instantaneous applause and standing ovation. And it was the audience, as the group of us, just felt like we had experienced something really extraordinary on the stage, that just went out to all of us. And I mean, this was Dublin, the Gaiety Theatre. There were priests and nuns there. There were all kinds of people from every walk of life. Within a week, actually, I remember seeing he finished that show. He finished Beckett, and within a week, I saw him perform Davies in The Caretaker. Mm-hmm. This other, sort of down and out character. So doing Beckett and Pinter back to back, extraordinary demands on Jack MacGowran, I'm sure, but both performances were quite wonderful, and it was inspiring. I didn't know. I said, "Gee, I'd really like to see that realized again someday." I didn't know I was going to do it. I didn't know I was going to attempt such a thing. I was still a student of literature and drama, so to speak. But it certainly was the main inspiration for attempting to do one-man performances of Beckett's diverse writings.
And what would you say when the time did come around where you made the decision to do it? Were you was it easy for you to, well, let me back up and ask the question differently. And that is, because you had seen him do it and you were so impacted by that performance, was it in any way in your mind that it would be difficult for you to get that out of your mind?
To get his interpretation.
Yes,
very much so. Yes, very, very much so. I was at the time I decided I wanted to do it. I was doing L'Étranger, The Stranger, in an original production at the Wilma Theatre, the old Wilma, when they were back on Sansom Street, and Yuri Zizka was directing. And playing the stranger was this actor, David Schaefer, who was a real aficionado of literature as I was. And we would have great conversations. And I mentioned to David, I said, I want to do this. I want to do a one-man Beckett play, and I want you to direct me. And I said, it's probably going to involve quite a lot of time and effort. And but he said, no problem. He said, I explained what I wanted to do. And he said, you know, he said he agreed, you know, Beckett's degree of difficulty 10. But he said, I'm with you. He was teaching at Friends Central at the time. So we spent a year. We spent a whole year of me going out there a couple times a week and just working a few hours, developing script, trying things, a variety of Beckett's writings, but based on MacGowran's, what Jackie MacGowran had done beginning to end, with a number of variations, but the same sort of idea, you know, a compilation of Beckett's writings. And Fight really tuned into Beckett. I was very lucky. I just had a hunch this guy would be the director I want to work with. And he was available. And we had this giant sort of theater in the Friends, you know, junior, senior high school to play around with. And it was a lot of work. And we enjoyed the process more than anything else. And I told him, I said, we might not even be able to perform it. There may be no audience, but you want to do this. So we knew this up front, but he said, it's no problem. He's, you know, as we say in the profession, the work itself is its own reward. And that proved to be so. You know.
But you did end up performing it quite extensively.
I did, yes. And when I first did it, it was quite, it's quite funny. It was, I wrote a letter to Bernard Havard. He was the new artistic director of Walnut Street Theatre. Bernard, you know, very kind and wonderful friend. And he wrote me back. He said, you know, I've stage managed some of Beckett's plays in England when he worked as a stage manager there. He said, I don't understand him at all. I don't like his plays. But on the basis of your letter, I'll give you my fifth floor theater for a couple of weeks. Second stage, Walnut Street wasn't going on yet. So it was still early days. So I had a theater, you know, and I had the director, and I had what I felt was the show. And there were the Philadelphia Inquirer was on strike. There was a major newspaper strike. So it was one of these, you know, just almost winging it. You know, I got an artist friend to do flyers. I posted them around town. I didn't have much money to advertise. I advertised in the Jewish Exponent, the City Paper, and the Philly Paper, you know, these small center city papers at the time. And but we got packed houses. Bernard came the last Saturday night, and it was now this is the artistic director of Walnut Street Theatre. He sat in the aisle. He sat in the aisle and watched the play. And then he came back afterwards. He said, Michael, that was quite remarkable. I'm glad I gave you the theater. And I was very humbled, you know. And, you know, and I've done various performances since then, you know, of a variety of Beckett's things. But I tuned into Beckett, I think, as a young man, first reading him undergraduate in college. And again, grad school in Ireland, studying formally and informally, you know, wandering around the streets of Dublin day and night when it was a large town then, not quite a big city, seeing all kinds of Dubliners. And I mean dispossessed Dubliners, you know, the down and out people, the people who had to live on the streets. I did the same thing in Philadelphia when I was working on script. You know, I got to know a number of street people. They're not easily to access, but, you know, to get to know the lives and the shape of how people just out there on the streets, living from day to day, hand to mouth, what their lives are all about. That was the background for my part of my studying of how to find these Beckett characters, and as well as your own life experiences, of course, So all of these things contributed a little bit to what I came to understand as this minor vocation of doing Beckett's writings. Not financially rewarding, may I add, but spiritually, personally, incredibly rich and rewarding. And I've been very lucky to get. I consider it an honor to be able to do these things. It's a challenge. It is. The language is a challenge. The rhetoric is a challenge. The humor is quite wonderful. But we can talk about performance of Beckett, in a little bit.
Well, no, I mean, I want to just go back real quickly to something Bernard said about, which is not unusual. A lot of people seem to, really take to it or really don't take to it. And I wonder, Michael, if you feel that, and I wonder if your story doesn't bear this out, that they haven't just, that perhaps the production they've seen doesn't contain the elements of either, whatever the elements are that you think are important to doing a really important production of Beckett, humor, the spirituality of it, the sort of getting underneath the quality of the characters on the street. I wonder if, so when you often hear that it's just, I haven't warmed to it, I've seen 7 productions of Godot and I just can't get there. Is it that they just quite maybe haven't seen a production that speaks to them in the same way Jack MacGowran's performance did, or your performance did, in Studio 5? Or is it that the production just didn't mind those elements well enough? Or is it just that I don't like existential theater? I don't want to think about these things, or a combination of all?
It could be any and all of the above. Yeah, I mean, I'm not one to sit in judgment of what's a good performance of a Beckett play or what isn't. I believe Beckett himself was always fairly considerate, at least in his public responses to various productions. I guess it can all depend. It could be any of those things. But I think if you do your basic homework, if you follow the script, if you don't sort of follow Beckett's words, follow his stage directions, and it should come out pretty close to what that author wanted. And that's,
So what was it about the performance? What was it about Jack's performance that just left people speechless?
Well, as the book, The Beckett Actor, points out several times, and I found in seeing him perform, both in The Caretaker and in Beginning to End, he was a very small man, very thin, very frail looking. He had just his presence on stage. He had a charisma. He had a great charisma, but he brought out great nurturance in the audience. You saw this little diminutive figure and the frailty of him, and the frailty of his soul, in a way, if I may say, through his performances, through his characterization, both physical and the voice. This big voice in this small, thin, man. It kind of faked you out, but you really cared for this person. I think in all of his performances, film too, you immediately cared for the character. You wanted to help this character. You wanted to nurture this character in any way you can. And that was a special gift I think MacGowran had. And I think that contributed to the popularity of all his performances, both on stage and on film. And he didn't milk that. It was part of what he had to give on the stage. It was part of who he was. But by no means would he ever manipulate people in a performance or, on his own that I know of, But, so I'd say that's part of it.
In working on the different, you've certainly done many productions, Krapp's Last Tape and just the one-man shows that you revived. Did you approach the work the same way each time? Or did say Krapp's Last Tape take you in a different direction as you as you worked on the material?
I was very young when I did Crap's Last Tape. I was about 24, 25. But I think with any coming back to a performance of something I'd done before, the same with Moon for the Misbegotten, the same with Molly Sweeney. The first thing I say is, let me tell myself that I've never seen the script before, and it's brand new for me, so that I can look for new things, so I can find new things, new ways of bringing energy to the script, and making it interesting and fun, not only for myself but for the audience, making it new, which we have to do with every play, every performance. Really, make it new and make it fresh and new for the audience every night. But when I would re-rehearse, say the one-man Beckett, beginning to end, or Know How On, the one I did first at the Painted Bride some years back from Beckett's later writings, I always try to approach it as if I've never seen it before, to find these new things, to find new ways of coloring the language of the script, bringing out meaning in a clear way, in a more interesting way, bringing out the humor perhaps more strongly, wherever I feel I've screwed up in previous performances of it, which you're never happy. And I think most Beckett actors, performers, we were talking about Lisa Dwan earlier, Jack MacGowran. Jack MacGowran, as that book says, he was never happy of any of his performances except A. Joe. When Beckett wrote A. Joe, that radio play for him, he felt he really came as close as he ever had to Beckett's full intentions and his own best performances. So, I mean, you can't have self-satisfaction. And the demands are such, like I say, with Beckett, the demands are such you can never be fully satisfied.
So how would you manage that? I want to ask you one thing before I forget to ask you, Michael. So Crap's Last Tape, how about now?
Well, now I've grown into the role.
Yeah, I mean,
Age-wise, as I found out doing doing the one-man Beckett 2 years ago up in Maine, where I had 10 days. I had 10 days notice, and I said, "Gee, maybe I can do a script in hand." Then I said, "Maybe I can do a somewhat of a staged reading," and but that script was still in the back of my mind, and those words of this playwright Beckett, 20 years was, last time I did it, they came back and images, and I just said, I think I've got this locked. I think I can do it full out. And I was lucky enough to do it. But I credit more Beckett's, memorable, unforgettable language and humor and the whole package that helped me bring it back, so quickly and make the deadline. But and growing into the role, as being an old actor now, we talked about this earlier, you and I, Tina, having lost a leg almost 6 years ago, and hit and run accident. I really am physically now one of Beckett's characters. His characters lose their limbs, they lose their vision, they lose their hearing. Lucky in Act 2 of Godot loses his speech. So I am literally and proverbially a Beckett character, and I'm sure my friends, all of them listening out there, can vouch for that.
Do you let's ask this one. Do you have a personal favorite? Can you identify a favorite piece that you've worked on?
Probably a humorous one. I mean, the humorous, more from Beckett's fiction. I'd say The Sucking Stones, which McGowan did so brilliantly. It is very demanding mathematically and physically. That's a favorite. Cascando, wonderful love poem. The poem Cascando, not the not the radio play Cascando. The story of Mrs. Louse and the Parrot from Malloy is a very bawdy, very funny one, and always a favorite with audiences. It does require, you got to watch the comic timing very carefully, but as with any comedy, you got to get the timing down cold, and especially with Beckett's comedy. So yeah, there are a number of favorites that, you know, that you could do them as party pieces almost. And there's so much, I mean, there's so many favorite parts of Beckett's range that I love. It's hard to pick out one, you know.
What do you think that it is, the constraints that the writing, that the constraints on the actor, the performative constraints we've talked about before, Billy Whitelaw talking about, you know, just like nearly losing her mind in her own words, you know, and Samuel Beckett being concerned that, you know, the psychological and the physical demands, Lisa Dwan writing about having to be strapped into, you know, because so she couldn't move in the works that she has, you know, one of the works that she's, it's just is escaping me right now, which you know the title of, but what is it that you think is it those constraints? Is it that her, you know, having to hurdle that mountain that is part of the draw to it?
Yes. Oh yeah. Yeah, pretty much. I would say the demands are such that you are physically drained afterwards, psychologically drained. A spirit or soul drainage can go on. It's like doing Lear, you know. It's like climbing the mountain, like doing the role of King Lear. You know, you can't do 2 performances a day of this sort of thing. It really would wear you out physiologically, in my humble opinion. And as we see it, it did really profoundly affect Jack MacGowran. But I'm sure, you know, Lisa Dwan, I'm sure all of them would say this. Who would, you know, Patrick McGee, you know, all those great Beckett actors, you know, they probably have to put everything into it. You need some quiet time both before and afterwards doing this type of role because of those demands. Any play is like this, of course, you know. But for some reason Beckett is, at least with me, and I've read of these others, you know, and Peggy Ashcroft and all of them, you know, they say you were really wiped out when you finish a performance of Beckett. And even excerpts that I've done, it's really noticeable. It's different if I'm performing, say, a poem of somebody or just a monologue from a play. But when I'm doing a monologue from Beckett, there's a drainage there, I feel, both physically and mentally. That's you prepare for, you know, do your physical exercises, do your warm-ups, do your vocal warm-ups, and take care of yourself psychologically, you know, before and after. It's like it's like training for a priesthood or something, you know, a rabbinate. It's very demanding.
Well, we talked a little bit earlier about, I think we listened to maybe one of the same or read the same interview with Lisa Dwan about her background is in dance and ballet, and the two make a lot of sense when you think about, I know in our rehearsals, you know, Bob Schmidt and I worked on a production of Endgame, not for the IRC, but for another company. We've done productions of Ohio Impromptu and Come and Go, smaller works, but there is such a I mean, there's the musicality, there's the dance-like quality of it and the musicality of it, but there's also just this religion of working on it. I'm using religion in the widest sense, but in however you interpret it, that makes it so rewarding, and perhaps was part of what you were speaking about in witnessing Jack MacGowran's work, where the audience was just, perhaps because they didn't know that the show was over, but also perhaps because they were moved like you were to a whole different place and time, which is what makes it so impactful. So it makes sense that ballet and the meter of it, you know, that she would have that background and be drawn to it. Is there anything specific in preparing for the revival or any of the one-man shows or any of the pieces that you've done that really kind of scares you about the work? Does it make you Nervous?
Well, yeah, the situation of the characters, they're, and I say this a lot about, as I look back on my own performances, not just of Beckett, but the type of roles I tend to get cast in over my career, and and especially with a lot of the Irish roles, they are, I call them derelicted souls. I tend to play a lot of derelicted souls, and by that I don't mean people who are destroyed by alcohol or drugs or anything like that. I mean that they have been pushed so far, to the very end of the spectrum of their lives, and denied. They are denied so much physically and psychologically, and lovelessness, and just hardly anything to live for. There's an affinity, I feel, and among all the characters, the various characters I've played, that share in this sort of a thing. And the Beckett character, a number of the Beckett characters, but the Beckett character, anonymous character that would be in, say, Beginning to End, or The Know How On, or any of his novels, Molloy, Malone Dies, The Unnameable, That Time, The Company, you could go on and on. There's a connection I make. I understand these people. Don't ask me how, but I feel lucky to be able to, and get an insight and this connection, which helps me in performance. And that kind of that's what keeps me going with them, and it is terrifying. To come back to your original question, the presentiments are often terrifying at the beginning, and you just I do my Buddhist mindfulness training. You just observe it in its terror, in its nakedness, in its ghastliness, that kind of a life, that kind of a person, and then your job is to find yourself in that person, and that person in yourself, and make these connections and build a character. Olivier would work from the outside in. I tend to be more from the inside out, starting with myself, as an acting technique of building a character. But these characters are a degree of difficulty 10, just like the writing. These are very difficult souls. I think I mentioned to you when I was teaching a course in modern Irish drama, filling in at Villanova, and we did O'Casey, and we did Sing, and we did all the classical Irish drama, and and I presented them with. We went over to the Fulvey Library and saw. I had them see a film of John Hurt. It was John Hurt doing Krapp's Last Tape. It was wild. The whole class was very, very angry at me, except a few of the very top students who kind of got it. But the class was very angry. And why do we have, that guy was horrible. What was wrong in his life? He was a mess. He's just an old dirtball. They had never had that kind of experience of life. They were young, they were youthful, they're college students, they're bright, they're talented. They had never met negative, horrible things in their lives. And it was coming out. And I let them go on. And I found it very, very fascinating to see these reactions. And Beckett has that kind of reaction on some people, but they were just starting out their lives. At middle age, they might be able to watch that and say, I understand that guy, or a good part of him now, And in old age, they might say, I am that person. I've gone through all of that, or most of that. So Beckett appeals to different people at different points in their life. But
yeah, someone wrote on a Facebook post, someone was posting about the production that's streaming now of Godot, and there was long discussion on the Facebook feed, and someone finally just chimed in, and people saying, I've seen this thing 6 times, I can't, not that production, but, and someone just finally chimed in and said, just give it some time, was the response.
Yes.
You need more time.
Yes, exactly.
So I wonder, in teaching it, You did teach a course, correct? Am I right?
Yes, I filled in for somebody who was on sabbatical. And
did you find what is the biggest challenge in teaching it then? Is it what you just talked about?
yes, I felt the students did not have access to this sort of a character, this sort of life experience. And, I was concerned because I wanted them to really enjoy Beckett and be able to read further of his writings, of his plays and of his novels, not to make a snap judgment just on one thing. It was, so I did my best, lecture wise, but I didn't force it on students either. And I said, well, you know what, it's just not your cup of tea. I can understand that. But I would, I'd say there are lighter things he's done. You might want to approach his writings more from reading some of his fiction, reading, the trilogy, Malloy, Malone Dies. I think they would find a lot of the humor in there much more accessible, and they could appreciate it pretty much with no problem. These were intelligent students.
I thought that one of the aspects that Jordan Young brought out in the book, The Beckett Actor, was that Jack MacGowran did an enormous service, maybe too strong a word, but his working on Beckett showed the larger public a way to access Beckett that made sense to them. Like, he illuminated Beckett's work in a way that hadn't been accessible for a large part of the public before that, which I thought was so interesting. So the two, Beckett made possible Jack MacGowran's career, and he always was the go-to person. You talk about in the book, it's almost like MacGowran fleshed it out better than what Beckett even envisioned. And yet he also helped to bring the work to a wider audience.
Yes, yeah. He toured the world, right? I mean, he did tour. He toured the States with it. I think he went to Australia with it, and in Paris, he had performed in other European countries with it, and it was almost like an underground word of mouth thing. You've got to see MacGowran doing Beckett. Beckett is actually funny. This guy brings out humor in Beckett, and I'm sure he probably got quite a lot out of it. I enjoy catching people. If I've had friends come, I'll go see your thing, but I don't really. He's not my cup of tea, And then they're fascinated at the end. I didn't know he was so funny. I said, yeah, because you didn't. Nobody told you could go to these places and these plays and these novels and this short fiction. He's hilarious, and very Irish too. There's a wonderful Irish humor, and his punning and stuff, and his I think of there's a description I heard. I forget what it's in one of the novels. I think Malone Dies maybe, or Malloy. What somebody's described as a well-to-do ne'er-do-well. That's a typical Beckettism, a well-to-do ne'er-do-well. And Beckett gives you the parallel structure, reverses the thing. You think he's going to say something nice, and then he slams the guy's a horrible monster. I'm sure we know many people in our American political scene, shall I say, who are well-to-do ne'er-do-wells. But we won't go there now.
Yeah. I want to ask you about Sean O'Casey. I read this in the book today. I thought it was so interesting. Talking about Samuel Beckett's work. He isn't in me, nor am I in him. Talking about the work. What do you make of that?
O'Casey said, that's O'Casey's saying, right? Yes. Very interesting. And yet Beckett revered O'Casey. O'Casey did not revere Beckett's works. They're two Dubliners. They're both Protestant Dubliners. O'Casey coming from the north side and genuine abject poverty. Beckett coming from the middle-class Foxrock suburbs of Dublin, the south suburbs. Where All That Falls is set, by the way, the radio play that you're going to do. We'll do
that we're going to do
together down the road. Get a plug in there. I think Beckett understood what he was saying and didn't take offense. I don't think Beckett took offense. As Beckett is working, as Beckett himself said, when he worked as an amanuensis for James Joyce as a young man, helping Joyce write Finnegan's Wake. And Beckett made a statement. He was asked about Joyce. And he said, well, Joyce could do everything. I'm paraphrasing now. Joyce could do everything because he knew everything. I'm dealing in lack of knowledge, in ignorance, in nescience, in the inability to have knowledge. It's a whole different kind of ball game of writing. And O'Casey and Beckett, I think, shared many things. They shared a Dublin sense of humor in their writings. They shared their Church of England, Church of Ireland background. But I don't think Beckett was that surprised by that statement or taken aback at all. And I think just Beckett's writings were not for O'Casey. I'm not sure when O'Casey would have died.
I think I read in the book they were it might have been Jack MacGowran that was trying to get a meeting together for them, and then
I think you're right.
It just never happened, and they
McGowan, and I think he had met O'Casey and visited him several times. You're right, and just couldn't get the two together. And yet, I would conjecture that had they gotten together and not talked about each other's writings, they would have had a ball. They would have got along fine.
Yeah, I tell the story, Michael. This is the conversation we were having the other day, right? The story about Beckett leaving money.
Yes. This is a wonderful story.
You think? I mean, do we have?
I'll tell two stories. I'll tell the real. I'll tell two Beckett stories that are actually true. And this is a friend of mine, Tom Padlow, who is a writer and illustrator, lives in Hamburg, Germany, with his wife. He went to Temple University. He's from Philadelphia. And he told me this remarkable story. I think it actually appeared in one of the biographies of Beckett. He was in Paris. This is back in the early mid-70s. And he was sort of the down and out in Paris and London. He was broke, and he was busking on the street in Paris. And he was Tom Padlow has probably read every great writer and seen every great movie that of anybody I know. He's just amazing encyclopedia of the arts. And Tom was busking. And he was near a construction site, and he's seen walking down the street. He sees Samuel Beckett coming, and he's like amazed. And so he went up. He introduced himself. He said, "Mr. Beckett, I just love your writings. I've read everything I can get my hands on. It's an honor to meet you." Da 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 da. Well, anyway, Beckett invited him. They went and had coffee together, and Tom is over the moon. He's telling himself, "I'm having coffee with Samuel Beckett, my hero, the greatest writer of the 20th century. Nobody's going to believe this." But he did. He had coffee with him. And, Beckett said, "What are you doing in Paris?" And he happened to mention, well, he's sort of broke. He's trying to get back to London so he can fly back to the States. He's got a plane ticket. He's been touring Europe as a student. And Beckett didn't say anything. So they finished their conversation, and they didn't talk too much about literature, a little bit about Ernest Hemingway, not in a negative way, but, Beckett had read some of his writings, and they had a lovely time, and he said, he came away, he was just ecstatic. I've been with Samuel Beckett having coffee. This is unbelievable. And he went back to his pension, where he was staying, and the next morning, the concierge said to him, "Oh, your friend left you an envelope here," and And Tom thought to himself, wait a minute, I don't know anybody in Paris. And he said, what do you mean, my friend? Who was it? And she described this older man, a very thin, very distinguished face and stuff. And he realized, he said, well, what time did he come by? He said, oh, about 6:30 in the morning. And Tom realized it was Samuel Beckett. And in the envelope was just enough money for him to catch a train and the ferry and get to London to be able to go back to the States. And that's a typical Beckett story of the generosity of this man and the humility. And they say when Beckett got the Nobel Prize in 1969, he gave half or most of it away, the money he got for the Nobel. He gave away to various friends, especially writer friends who were down and out, who really needed a cash subsidy pretty quick. Aidan Higgins, he had helped a number of people, and he helped get them published too. Beckett was very, very generous like that, and extraordinarily so. So it's not, it's not an unusual story. Tom, ever since then, he would draw an illustration. He would do some kind of a drawing, artistic piece, and send it to Beckett. He had Beckett gave him his address, said, when you're ever in Paris, look me up, get together, But he would send Beckett one of his artworks every year at Christmas time until Beckett passed, in 1989. But I'll tell you another story that is that I think you'll find quite interesting, and this has to do with performance. A friend of mine, Joseph Boyce, it was back and forth to New York. He's a playwright and lawyer in New Jersey, and he put this woman, Joan Brown, who was sort of an entrepreneur, and she was going to put together a show called A Dublin Evening, and she was going to. She called me and she said she heard I did Beckett. She asked me if I could do a little segment of performance of some of Beckett's writings for her show, about 5 to 10 minutes. So I said, sure. I was delighted. It was at the ATA Theatre, American Theatre of Actors over on, she rented a space in there over on 8th Avenue, I think probably around 38th, 40th Street. Anyway, she's going to do the show Dublin Evening. It is early December. It's around Christmas time. It was the coldest December New York City had had in years. Joan put me up. I stayed in her apartment and slept on the floor with her kitty cat. We kept each other warm. Luckily, her apartment had heat, but it was so cold in New York City. If you were just walking around on the streets and you hardly saw anybody, the cross winds from both rivers, as well as the north wind coming down the main avenues, you would get frostbite if you were walking around for more than an hour. It was that bad. Everybody was just taking subways or cabs or driving. And so Joan rents this theater space. The theater has no heat either, by the way. And here's this hodgepodge of a variety show. We're going to do Beckett, A Dublin Evening, Christmas time. People are shopping. I thought, who's going to come to this show? It was packed. Every show was packed. Every Dubliner, I think, in the tri-state area came to the show. Instead of going shopping for Christmas, it was packed.
Was their Christmas.
And the headliner was this wonderful actor. It was Patrick Bedford. And Patrick Bedford was a Dublin actor. He worked many years at the Gate Theatre. I'm sure he probably worked at the Abbey, but the Gate and working under Micheál MacLiamore, Hilton Edwards. But Patrick and Donald Donnelly were the two young actors. As young actors, they had premiered on Broadway Brian Friel's first big hit, Philadelphia, Here I Come. So Patrick ended up, and they did it in rep. The main character for Philadelphia, Here I Come is this Gareth, this young man who's going to leave Ireland and come to Philadelphia, stay with his aunt and her husband. So Donald Donnelly and Patrick Bedford were brilliant actors. They would alternate in rep Gareth Private and Gareth Public every other night. So years pass. Patrick Bedford has stayed on in New York. He's become more or less a New York actor. Long story short, I thought, Patrick Bedford is the headliner. This is going to be great. I'm going to meet this, I know about this actor. He's a wonderful Irish actor, Dubliner, of course. And he was doing a segment of James Joyce's Finnegan's Wake, the Aunt and the Gracehoper, little comic thing. And I was doing my Beckett. But the word had got around. Joan Brown, she said, geez, Patrick's like sort of slagging you. I said, what do you mean? Well, he's going around saying, well, this Philadelphia, what do you bring a Philadelphia guy up here for? Why don't we have all New York actors, just New York? Why do they have to get this guy coming up from Philadelphia to do Beckett? Who's he think he is? And no. So I felt very intimidated in the production with Patrick. And, I tried to make friends with him, but it was kind of difficult. He'd just sort of look at me and go, mumble something. And so there wasn't much communication between the two of us. And I'd say Joan would have a cocktail party in between matinees and evening shows. All the audience would come, and it was just one big Irish piss-up, so to speak. So, and Patrick and everybody be getting sort of tuned up, and I would stay away, and most of the, some of the other actors, but myself, I would be concentrating on my Beckett, freezing to death. And so one Saturday night, one Sunday, the last Sunday matinee, here we get to the climax of this. Patrick Bedford, the great Irish actor, who's, by the way, he's been going through difficult days at this time, Lord rest him now. But, he has taken to the drink pretty big time. And he doesn't show up for the matinee. It's half hour, no Patrick. 15 minutes, no Patrick. And Joan is running around, where's Patrick? Where's Patrick? What are we going to do? Patrick's not here. And we don't know where he is. We don't know if he's in the building. And the whole cast, which we would do every show, were huddled in one room, the women's dressing room, with all the little children who were doing the Irish step dancing in their skimpy outfits. We'd all huddle in one room with a space heater to keep the little kids warm and keep ourselves warm. We're all huddled in this room. Joan's running around. She runs backstage. She fell through a hole in the back of the stage. Our entrepreneur fell through a hole backstage, yelling this, where's Patrick? Where's Patrick? What are we going to do? Patrick's the headline. Finally, Patrick comes. Patrick shows up, 5 up. She's already told the house, we're holding the house till, 2:15. Patrick shows up, none the worse for wear, may I add. Goes right to the can, goes right to the John. And Joan's running around, where's Patrick? Well, actually, he showed up.
How did she get out? I mean, how far down the hole did she fall? Did she trip or did she
almost to her thigh, I think. Almost to her thigh.
It's not funny.
Terry Donnelly, who's a wonderful Irish actress and has done tons of things in New York, for years. She works regularly with the Irish Rep. We were all roaring laughing. And so Joan's running around. And so funny, we said, Joan, Patrick's he's in the bathroom. He's in the bathroom. But none of us wanted to go near him because we knew this was not a good day for Patrick. So yeah. Joan goes to the bathroom and she's knocking on the door. Patrick, are you in there? Are you in the bathroom? Are you here? Are you here? Are you going to do the show? And there is this pause, and this complete pause, and we're all listening from the one dressing room. And then in this loud, stentorian voice, you hear, I can only deal with one shite at a time.
Like the thought of you and all the kids around the space heater.
That was Patrick's rejoinder. And the little kids are looking, and then we all just burst out laughing. We were roaring laughing, and we had a great final show. Longer story short, Patrick had announced, the last day that his girlfriend, the woman he was living with, she was videoing the last performance. And would any of us, if you want to buy a copy of it, VHS, $10, $15. So I signed up for it. Oh, Patrick, yes, I'd love to have it, and I really admire your performance. So a week or so later, I get the tape of the whole show, and in it, I get a note from Patrick Bedford himself and saying, Dear Michael, I don't have to tell you how wonderful you were doing Beckett. And it was just unbelievable. I just thought, this is really wonderful. Patrick has passed, us now, but he really was an extraordinary actor. You could see this when he did his Finnegan's Wake piece. You could see the great actor that was there, that, what have you, got lost in, in the world of New York and party time, et cetera, But I was very, very moved when I got that notice from him, with the little note with the tape, which I still have to this day. Amazing man. But anyway, those are the travails and vicissitudes of performing Beckett.
Well, the noises off part of it is of Joan running. There's at least one good noises off story in every show, and those are the fun. And thus I wanna make sure we get in here, Michael, your work that you've done up at the Belfast Maskers Theatre up in Belfast, Maine, and your work there, and how give us the
Yeah, it's interesting. When I first went there in 1984, I think it was, it's sort of, I call it the poor man's Ireland, Maine itself. It's just beautiful, especially in the summertime. But I kind of fell in love with friends of mine retired from Philadelphia, Baz and Nancy Burwell. And they started, and I helped them to do this, they started a theater in Belfast, Maine, community theater, and got the whole community involved. A wonderful group of people up there, and I've made many, many friends over the years going back. But Baz and his wife both passed on somewhere in the late 90s. And the theater is still going. And Peg Nickerson is the artistic director now. And she was the one who 2 years ago in the summer asked me to do one Person Beckett, which ironically is the first performance I ever did there was in the Abbott Library in Belfast. Again, doing a one Person Beckett play as sort of a fundraiser for the Belfast Maskers. So this summer, Meg has asked me to do teach some teen theater classes, which should be interesting. I think 3 teen classes I'm to teach. And then I suggested I teach a master class for adult actors. So we hope to have that in and get some takers there. It is, I think they have a converted church that has been empty for a few years, and they were able to convert that into the theater. It's quite, I guess it holds about 100, 150 people. But I just became enamored of the town and its people, not having grown up in small town life. It was actually founded by sea captains from Belfast, Northern Ireland. So there is that, Irish connection there. But I've been really, I've done a number of shows with them. And I a few of my one-man shows. I've done an evening with Mr. Dooley there with them, the Beckett. I performed in some of their community theater shows also. Oh, and I directed Brian Friel's Dancing at Lunasah, and some summers back. And then there was an Irish group of women were up from Portland, Maine, and saw it and said, "Could you come down to Portland and do the show here for us? We have an Irish society in Portland. We have a hall, and we have about 500 people who belong to the society." And I said, sure. I asked the actors if they wanted to do it. They said, yeah. I said, let's go. And we folded up the set, and after we did our run, and did it down there. Again, Friel, beautiful language, rhetoric, the eloquence, the humor. And of course, his play Dancing at Lughnasa, it's a big Broadway hit. And so I've got to direct there. I've got to do some acting and bring my one-man shows there to help build audience for the theater. And I have a good rapport with the community over 35, 36 years. I have many, many wonderful good friends there. A number of them are probably watching, tonight, watching our podcast here. So hello out there, all you Belfasters and Bell Slowers. Don't worry, we're with you.
And you're heading up this summer again.
I hope to
Yeah.
be up there the month of August and a week in September, yes, to do these classes. Working vacation. I'll be writing. I'll probably be learning lines for all that fall to do with you.
Me
And,
too.
so writing, rehearsing, and getting together with old friends to the degree that we can, depending on what the pandemic status is. Outdoors certainly. It should be safe, but it's an artist community. There are a lot of visual artists there, sculptors, painters, very literate audience, very sophisticated people. And the native Mainers are quite wonderful. I've learned a lot from them too. The Down East accent for one, which is tricky. But it's a very rich, creative
Community.
atmosphere for me. It's sort of my second home, if you will. And
It sounds like I always think of Maine and doing theater in a church or in any space in Maine sounds like a beautiful way to bring Beckett to nature and
yeah. Oh yeah.
keep it alive.
And there's real aficionados up there. There's a lot of New York City people who have migrated there too. It's quite impressive. Many, many wonderful friends up there.
Well, Michael, we should I guess head on to dinner here. It's been a wonderful conversation. I could listen to your stories all night, and I just want to say to everyone who contributed questions in the chat, I didn't get to as many as I wanted to. I didn't get to just a couple, but I was so busy listening to what you were saying, Michael. So thank you for taking time to be with us, and I can't wait to keep talking and getting a production of All That Fall going.
It's really been delightful.
So much fun.
Quickly with this.
It really does. Well, be well, and until the next time.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
And thanks to everybody for joining us here this evening. I hope you'll be with us next week, Saturday, May the 22nd, when Kirsten Quinn joins us on Into the Absurd. I cannot wait to talk to Kirsten about what's coming up for the Irish Heritage Theatre and all the many shows that she's done here for the IRC, her special joy that she brings to the stage, her presence, her amazing emotional range, and just the fun that we have, the backstage stories, and just what it feels like to think about getting on a stage again. So that's going to be next week, Saturday at 5. I hope you'll join us. In the meantime, have a wonderful week ahead. Enjoy everything there is to enjoy. And we hope to see you back next week on Into the Absurd. Be well.